Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Games Jobs live stream. I'm Harry Petch, the community and content manager for Games Jobs Live, and today we've got another fantastic Jobs Board Highlights episode. And yeah, for those who don't know what the Jobs Board Highlights series is, it's a series where we take a look at a few different jobs that I've found on the Games Jobs Live Jobs Board, which you can find at the link that's currently on screen. And it's about taking a look at the different jobs that are in these disciplines and having a look at those job specs and kind of demystifying some of the weird wording that gets used in some of these applications. But today we've got two really great disciplines lined up. We've got quality assurance and we have programming, which will be coming up later on in the second half. But first of all, we're going to be taking a look at some quality assurance jobs. And to help me with this, I have a very special guest joining me from Hyperluminal Games, Melissa Cocker. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Yeah.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. Yeah. Melissa is the social media and community coordinator at Hyperluminal over here in Dundee. And you have quite like the experience working in quality assurance before you moved into your current position. Do you want to give a little bit of background on that?
Yeah, for sure. So I started working at Hyperluminal in 2021, originally as a junior QA, and then spent a little bit of time in that role, moved up to mid-level QA, and yeah, it was really cool. It was an amazing foot into the industry for me as someone who had been like living in Dundee, so very like in the area of like the games industry, but not ever like fully part of it, you know? So yeah, it was really cool. And then I have worked from going from QA into social media, just because that's a little bit more where my skill set sits, which has been a really cool thing. But it's also really cool to see that how the QA has helped in the social media side of things too. It's been cool.
Yeah. How do you like? I'm actually like just a little bit curious. Like, how does some of the stuff from QA like help you nowadays in like the social media stuff?
For sure. A lot of what helps the most specifically with doing community for video games related content is having that knowledge of how game systems work. Like I've got a lot more editor knowledge now, a lot of like Steam related, like debugging menu kind of stuff, which helps you get specific menus up for getting rid of UI and things like that if you're trying to get specific screenshots, which is really cool. I didn't know like the amount of work that went into creating some of the images and some of the content that goes on social media until like I started getting my hands into this role and my grubby little paws all over Unity. Oh boy.
Yeah, like I know that like QA typically and like historically in the pipeline has kind of been like quite good as like an entry point for a lot of developers. Like we see in a lot of different job specs, there's often the dreaded line of like 1 to 2 years of games industry experience, yada yada. And one of the big questions is how do you even get to that point and learn those kind of pipelines? And typically like QA tends to sort of be the answer like historically really. But I think without further ado, should we take a quick look at some of these jobs?
We should, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. Here we are. So I've got the Games Jobs Live Jobs Board open. So I'm going to filter by, we just recently looked at all of the different jobs, and how the jobs board works for those who don't know. It's what we do is we take a look at all of the different games companies for our data reports, which we put out in a different series. And what we do is we go in and we track all of these jobs also on the jobs board. So you can go and apply to them directly. These are as many of the jobs as there are like in the UK and even in like Europe and Australia as well that are all currently hiring. And we've got a bit of breakdown by disciplines. There's a lot, definitely, a lot going on in the code category, absolutely. We've got 14 jobs in QA. So immediately we kind of got top here. And I think there's one I'm immediately going to check out, Melissa.
I wonder why.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Hyperluminal's one. Because I
Sounds
think
good.
you're very familiar with this role. Do you have like a little introduction about this role you want to give actually?
For sure. I mean, this is kind of the role that I first stepped into when I was getting into the industry and like getting my experience. So I think it's probably the one that I've got the most experience with. Um, but yeah, this is a great entry level point. In our studio specifically, we've had so many people across so many different disciplines. Some people coming from uh, games university courses coming into this role, but also people coming from completely different career choices and fields and things who wanted a career change, and this has been their entry point into games as well. So it's not just something for people that have like been specifically to a uni or a college to train for this. It's for anyone really. So if this is something that you want to get yourself into, this is the perfect entry point for you.
Great. And like in terms of the kind of stuff you know work on, Hyperluminal, you know, Tracy works on a lot of stuff like work for hire, so doing stuff helping like other studios as well as, you know, original IP. I mean, I know last year you folks launched your like first real like launch into full IP with Pine Hearts.
We
So
did.
yeah,
It's
that
very
was very cool.
exciting.
Yes, I do my research. But yeah, so you'll be presumably like working on a mix of both of those kind of like projects. I would assume.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the studio, a lot of work for hire. We do a lot of external work with some really cool clients. There's a really broad range of projects that the QA team are currently working on. There's a lot of QA within HLG. Makes up one of the largest departments within the studio for sure. Um, but yeah, then we also have like the OIP side of things where when people have been working on the external client work, it can be fun to swap into doing something a little bit more internal. So you get that blend of both where you're working externally with clients, which is great experience if you're going to like uh, get your career further up within QA. You want to learn how to speak with external clients, have that kind of repartee. I do
Mhm.
not know, don't know the words I'm going for, but you want to have that back and forth where you can talk well with an external client, but then also on the other side of things, you're going to get that experience of working with within the team, and like speaking to the design team, speaking to the coders, speaking to art, UI, concept, like pretty much everyone uh, is having a say in some of these meetings. And so it's really cool to see the backbone of how the game is being built, as well as just seeing like the final game kind of side of things and just giving your feedback.
Awesome. Brilliant. And yeah, if we look in looking down at some of the juicy stuff in terms of those requirements, tasks, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think you've covered a lot in terms of the types of tasks we're doing. Jira. Anyone who watched the first Jobs Board highlights will I will spare you on my Jira rant once more. But it's a free thing you can definitely sign up for. Really good for tracking anything with like production. They also run Trello, which is good for creating like kind of Kanban boards, which is a type of like management structure. So definitely go and make a Jira for any kind of project that you're doing. So yeah, as we scroll down this list a little bit more, getting into the different requirements for it. Melissa, I know you've talked already about like in terms of requirements for like hyperluminal, it is really quite like open to anyone just wanting to even like make that kind of career change into it. But is there anything that if you were going in and you know applying again for the job as like a new applicant that you'd recommend as some good to haves or things that might help you like stand out, because there's going to be a lot of people going for these roles. So is there anything that anyone can be putting in their portfolios or their applications immediately that can like help show that kind of like say IT competence as it says?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, like my biggest thing going into that role was communication, being able to like effectively communicate within your department, but also to other departments, what issues were. You don't necessarily need to know all of like the technical terms, but if you can find there's GDC Games Developers Conference talks that kind of talk a bit more about like the terms specifically of like what is in or the language that's used within game development. And so having some sort of like knowledge of that can be useful. So when you're encountering issues, being able to effectively tell the team what's wrong would be great. When it comes to like IT competence specifically, I mean, I know it mentions G Suite and Microsoft Suite, but those are like really some of the programs that we use a lot. They can seem quite basic, but like having a firm grasp of your way around like Google Drive, Google Sheets, specifically if you're working in like large teams, trying to collate information together, it's a big one to know. And Google documentation, basically knowing how those kind of like link together, and having a proficiency in knowing how you can make the most out of those softwares can be super useful.
Hey, brilliant, awesome. I'd say also, just in general, if people are kind of already, making games, that kind of stuff, they're trying to like do a bit of quality assurance already. Are there any kind of like pieces of software that you know of that might be good for people like wanting to just like basically, or even initiatives even that people like who want to like start in QA might be able to do just to get like a couple of little things and just start doing things?
For sure. I mean, if you are passionate about any kind of game or in any sort of community that has beta tests or like alpha tests and things like that, signing up for those can be like a huge boost of experience for getting into a role like this. It not only gives you kind of that firsthand experience of what it's like to test a game, you're going to be giving that feedback to the devs, but it shows the initiative that you are interested in the industry, as well as like if the games that you're testing work with the studio that you're applying for, it shows like that you're excited about that kind of content that aligns with what the studio is producing. And it could be a really good way for you to kind of have fun, but still gain that firsthand experience. A lot of the experience that I kind of leaned on was, it doesn't need to be video games as well, because my experience was very physical based. It was Dungeons and Dragons, but I played a lot and did a lot of like DMing. And so like kind of that background work of like planning things like that, designing campaigns, designing one shots, having that knowledge of how to make the player enjoy the experience can be super useful. And like the things that you might not expect in your life to be relevant can actually be quite relevant to what you're applying for. You just need to kind of think about it in a slightly different way.
Brilliant. Awesome. That's brilliant. Yeah, I think in particular that idea of like, take part in like, alpha and beta tests, that kind of thing. Maybe even like, writing up your own test cases, test documents, that kind of thing. I know there's also like a couple of like things you can sign up for, which are like, crowdsourced like QA testing things, where some people like apply their games to it, and then you can like join in with that, and you get like a modified version of OBS that shares with developers how you play the game. I think all of that kind of stuff, yeah, that really does add into that level of experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's like a Reddit somewhere that you can join if you want to be a Reddit person, but like I'm sure there's like people out there asking specifically for people for QA testing and for that experience and the feedback. And so going out of your way to do that shows initiative.
And if you are actually like if you are listening to this and you are looking for places to find QA testing and that kind of thing, get your name out there and that kind of thing, I have seen there's a few people who have put their games up on the Games Jobs Live Discord, because we have like a bug testing and like QA channel that we can do for those kind of call out posts. So anything that helps anyone really is tends to be someone that's just ends up being helpful for everyone, really.
Yeah. And even if that doesn't end up like leading to the job, if you're using that as like your experience, working with that developer to do QA for them is such a huge like networking opportunity. And now you know that person, and that person might be the link to getting your foot in the door.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah, the networking aspect is so, yeah,
it's
massive
all
in
linked.
the games industry. Brilliant. Yeah, so that was like a junior level job. We're going to take a look at a couple of probably mid-level jobs as well, just to see like because you went from sort of like, associate QA testing sort of down that route of going into like social media and really like using those communication skills that you get on that kind of job, um you know into your kind of career path. But I think it'd be interesting, let's say like the Blazing Griffin games, for example. They're looking for a QA. They're looking for a QA tester. And Melissa, I was wondering, if you're able to speak a little bit in terms of your like day-to-day experience, like working with some of these pieces of software. Let's take a look at some of the like things we can demonstrate. So experience in quality assurance testing, preferably in the gaming industry. There we go. If you're kind of in mid-level, that kind of foot in the door would hopefully already be there. But again, if you're sort of like not in that position, that kind of stuff we mentioned around, crowdsourcing it or volunteering for these different schemes, building that into like a nice little like portfolio and CV. Those are all credits and that sort of like rack up really. I think that's all helpful. A strong understanding of game development processes and the game development process and software development lifecycle. Again, I think that's quite similar already. Analytical problem-solving skills, keen attention to detail. Classic, we love that. I feel like I see that on every job spec, I think.
For sure. It's something that
Yeah.
everyone's looking for. But like even that's something that you can like take from somewhere else. Like if you've, I don't know, if you've done like a stock check at a supermarket before where you've had to do like date rotation and things like that, that's attention to detail because you're having to make sure that the products aren't going out of date, make sure they come to the front first so that they're being sold. My experience was with graphic design, so that's where my background is. It's my degree is in graphic design, and so that was really big in lending itself to being like the attention to detail kind of thing. I was quite good at spotting like small issues with like text and UI, so that was kind of one of the things that I spent a lot of time working on. So yeah, just know what your skills are and what your strong points are, and you can sell them really well when you go into an interview.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I was also curious because one of the things Blazing Griffin mentioned specifically are proficiency in using like bug tracking tools and software. You've mentioned you use like Google Suite. You use like Google Suite and that kind of software. In terms of like other pieces of software that you might use it, so that's like around QA. I suppose like are you able to sort of say like a little bit like what kind of tools you do kind of use on that like actual QA
Yeah,
QA
for sure. Like the biggest tool that we were using was or I say was, we still are. I'm just not in QA. But the biggest tool that we use at Hyperliminal is Jira. So our production team use Jira to plan out our sprints. They use that to give out tasks, and our QA team use it to log bugs. So we kind of have a standardized process of how we log a bug and kind of how you go about deciding priority. Each studio will likely have slight differences between how they log priority and like what they deem as high priority, depending on what sprint you're in. But you also want to tag kind of what department is going to be dealing with the issue, having a good definition of like the title of what's wrong, and then being able to write out easy to follow reproduction steps and like an in-depth version of like what's happening is great. And then yeah, basically from there, production will take it and figure out who's the best person to deal with that that issue, and then it all stays within the one software, which is brilliant. It's much easier to track. We also use a lot of we use OBS or various screen recording softwares are available, but I mostly used OBS to kind of take any screen recordings of things I needed to get while we were playing games live or taking screenshots and things like that. Having a firm grasp of your file system is also great. Being able to like keep everything organized and having a good naming structure for what you're taking screenshots and videos of, because if it comes to like a week later and you need to find something again, it can be a nightmare if it's like 25 underscore 01 24 underscore like
Yeah,
2024 underscore no, no,
and
no,
then
no.
final vinyl 2,
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
classic. We love
You
it.
want to avoid that.
Yeah,
But yeah, Jira is the big one that we use at Hyperliminal. So
yeah.
I guess if there's like software that has like that kind of round, all-encompassing nature that your team can kind of fluidly use throughout the processes, but all used together, that's probably something you want to focus on.
I think yeah, from my own experience, like leaning off into this as well, I completely forgot that Jira obviously has like, you know, Confluence and like that. Jira does cover the entire suite
It's everything.
of project management and bug fixing, everything. They've got a whole software development category, I believe. So you know, that's even more of a reason to make that account. But if you if you don't want to use Jira, or you know, in my positions, some things which I've used in the past as well, GitHub. When you make a GitHub repository, you've got GitHub issues, which effectively kind of works similarly as that, and for like bug tracking and raising and like reducing bugs. It's not. I think you can also, there is a plugin that lets you seamlessly integrate that within Jira as well.
That's
So
really cool.
yeah, all roads go back to Jira. Yeah, but I know I know there are some projects that have used that, and that kind of stuff could be very quite useful and brilliant. I think also there is also a software that I believe is like free and open source. It's like a little bit old, but it's called Bugzilla, and it's kind of like
Mm.
it's sort of classic. At least like the university I went to, like used it a lot for building up those kind of like strategy, for building up those kind of like QA skills and reporting bugs. So I would recommend also taking a peek into that if, you know, you're wanting to kind of like make your own like almost mini studio at home and have like a separate server you're putting things out to. That might be a bit complex though. But there's all those different options. I'll try and put links to all of these software that we're mentioning in the description below. But yeah, brilliant. I think looking through everything, the only other thing that jumps out to me, like agile methodology and working in like agile as like a development team. I'm wondering, Melissa, like at Hyperluminal, like do you like use like agile in terms of like development, or is it sort of like roughly different kind of style you folks use?
We do use like agile planning for our sprints and things. That was something that we were aware of when it came to doing reproductive testing, making sure that issues were done for or complete and fixed for different softwares for specific updates. But it wasn't something that we had a big hand in personally when I was working at HLG. It might have just been the projects that I was on, because some definitely lent on it more than others. But having an awareness of how the agile methodologies work and how your team uses them and like where they're at in their plan can be super useful. I don't know if you've got any more experience with that. I feel like we're like bridging a gap of like, I'm coming in from like non-games side of things, and you're coming in with like all the games experience knowledge.
From being in the coding dungeons, as it were.
Mm.
From being in the coding dungeons. Yeah, I think one very like useful thing if you work in a lot of like university projects within academia, I would recommend going through your modules and considering if like the group projects you did, especially those were probably, you know, universities tend to sort of teach more agile methodologies nowadays and that kind of thing. But I think it would be a whole rabbit hole to go into like the details of agile. But I think it's, as you say, really just understanding that it exists, and like, you know, Google is your friend. Googling is a lovely bit of a skill. To, you know, figure out what it is, and I think you can apply it somewhat, like this idea of doing, you know, sprints for like different features if you're taking part in like a 1 month long game jam. That's kind of like, I think if you do that, you can, you know, start mentioning that you sort of do that kind of thing in a portfolio, and that kind of thing might look quite nice.
We love a game jam. It's such
Do
a
love
great
it.
place for like getting
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, we do love a game jam, and we posted about this on the Discord. But towards the end of next month in May, as we're recording this, we're going to be hosting the comeback of the games parade game jams that we ran all the way back in like 2020 to 2022. There were lovely jams. It's going to be a 10-day long one, and the idea is that we're going to get like industry studios to like help with judging and giving feedback to all the entries essentially.
That's
And
exciting.
yeah, and I mean, if you end up joining in, you know, we like to basically live stream and give live feedback on each of the games. So, you know, trying to you know, respect your time and like make it a good opportunity to put in some, you know, some really great work in there. But yeah, but there'll be more details on that if you go to the Games Jobs Live Discord. We'll be posting more about it, and I'll post a video up here once we have a lot more details about how it's going to function. But let's take a look at one more QA job, I think, for the day.
Absolutely.
The one I'm going to take a look at. I want to take a look at the QA analyst role for Lucid Games, which this one's like a sort of contract role leading up to the year. But, you know, seemingly as like sort of a trial thing that might, you know, have a bit of an extension if you really stand out as a candidate. And taking a quick breeze through the introductory job spec, not too much sticks out there. Let's take a look at some of the job requirements and see if there's anything else that we can bring out here. Experience working in an embedded development team, which that seems quite standard. Again, I think if it comes to if you don't have that experience working in embedded development team, I like the best way of doing that is to, you know, like try and volunteer or try to like, you know, set up those positions to put yourself in that position where you are working in at least like a volunteer embedded team. That's not saying like, you know, that's not saying like work for free. I'm just gonna say, you know, unpaid
Yes.
internships do exist, but
Know your worth.
be very careful about those. Know your worth. Know
Yeah.
your worth and know what you're looking to get out of them.
For sure. Working in game jams, actually, like even though they're not like for a long period of time, you can get kind of a feel for how those teams work, especially if you're working with people who are more experienced, and they can also help give you some kind of pointers and guides on like how the structure might look in a more established studio. So that is still a good option. You might not be able to use it as all of your portfolio information, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah. Then we're looking for again proven experience with bug reporting, workflow, and bug management, as you previously mentioned.
Get on Jira.
Get on Jira. Get on those alpha and betas. Proven experience of successfully working towards deadlines. Yeah, a good understanding of game performance. So going into some of these more in-depth ones, a good understanding of game performance. I think that's a very kind of specific one, I think, for this job. I wonder if there's like how you could potentially pop that in like a CV or within you could put something like that in a CV or a portfolio. It feels like to me that might be more of like a write-up kind of thing. If you do like maybe some write-ups or even have some projects you've done in the past, like they mention they want to see people with computer science degrees or those with like proven experience, indicating like they might want to see a portfolio of like a couple things you've made in development to you know, like work alongside like your job doing QA. So I have a feeling like, you know, it might be a case of, you know, caring about performance in any personal projects you've made, I believe.
Yeah, I guess also with like your own games and your own gaming experience, depending on the intensity of the games that you're playing, you might have come across issues before where like frames dropping and things like that, or you might not be able to play with games at like specific settings, and knowing how much your computer can handle or like what various parts of your computer do and how that relates to the performance of the game is probably something that can also be of worth here. So even if you're a hobbyist at like working on your computer, that might still be worth mentioning within a CV, within a cover letter, something like that, talking about the time that you've spent researching into parts or a specific goal that you had in mind that you wanted to get to and why you chose the parts that you did. But again, that is still hobbyist level and may not be the direct experience that they're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the main caveat with all this is that this is again looking towards like those like mid-level jobs, which tends to be sort of a step above, a step above that associate level. But I think that is actually just, I think just to kind of like round this all off, really, actually, that's kind of like one of like a really good point to sort of like leave things on a little bit, actually, because I think it's quite important, seeing as, you know, QA is such like a big field. It's, you know, really like open, but that also means it's going to be really competitive. So the things you can do to set yourself out in your application is going to be important. Like, I think would you say like it goes a bit understated how much of like making you know, set yourself apart as an individual by putting in like, you know, stuff you're actively interested in, you know, games that you're actively interested in that you really want to join, that kind of passion, that kind of stuff can like really help out, would you think?
Oh, for sure. Like I fully think that the reason that the guys hired me at HLG is because I made a couple of Final Fantasy references that were funny. Or at least that's what I'm going to tell myself. But that is definitely one of the big things to consider when you're applying for roles. If you don't get something specifically like at a studio or something, it might like, it's not necessarily you and it's not necessarily your experience. It might be what they're looking for specifically, and like what your experiences might not fit, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to fit somewhere else, and it might be a better fit elsewhere. Like my experience is a lot less technical and a lot less like computer science related, but with something where there's like more work for hire stuff, or like that's not so OIP, that's so specifically looking for things like that. It might be something that you're more flexible to work around and build up those other skills while you're honing the ones that you actually already have within you. Well, that was very poetic.
Well, that was very poetic. Yeah, I think like if we've got like, you know, three things to take away, if you don't take anything else away from, you know, like if you don't take anything else away about QA, three main things to take away, I would say. Definitely, yeah. Put in you know, try to like put, you know, that element of yourself in your applications, especially when it comes to this, where it's a lot more like the personality is going to be important. Show that you're like a good person to work with, essentially. You know, I think getting on top of those like alpha and beta tests is just like a really underrated but really interesting thing I think you can do to also set yourself apart and get those networking things. And I think I'd also say like just, you know, writing your own documentation, docs, like reports, make a Jira, the classic, all of that. I think if those are three interesting takeaways we can make from all of this.
Yeah, for sure. Networking, always. Just because like you might not get like a specific role, like you never know who might help you get a role. Not that you should just be like making friends and networking with people for those roles. Like you should be networking to kind of get that experience as well, and to meet those people, and those people will be your peers, and they'll be the people that you like work alongside. So you want to make a good kind of impression, and you want to make a good connection with them, so that hopefully when your name comes up somewhere, they'll be like, oh, I met them and they were really cool. And that's the impression that you want to leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on and like chatting all about QA with us. Really appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.
On that topic of networking, if people do have questions, you know, regarding either like, you know, social media, jobs, those kind of career paths, you know, QA or that kind of entry into things, would it be okay if you you know, if I could send you some like questions, that kind of thing, if people do ask them in the description?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I'm also on
Brilliant.
LinkedIn, just Melissa Cocker. You'll see my face. Feel free to fire me a message if you have anything, or also
Excellent.
send it through Harry. I don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. I think without further ado, I think we will move on to our programming section. All right, so let's start covering some programmer roles. For this, it'll just be myself joining you all today. Now, again, my background is more in a designer category. However, I'm lucky enough to have a bunch of friends who are in various programming and technical teams in the industry. So I have ran a few questions by some people who I know, and I do have a few interesting points that I can bring up and that I've learned about like the programming area. Which let's see if we can like bring some of these up in the different like job reports. However, as with everything, I'd say like take a lot of this feedback with a pinch of salt. The reason why we're going to be running this series multiple times is that there's going to be lots of people who can give different sets of feedback and different advice. So just because I'm giving it doesn't mean it's like the be all end all of advice. I think it's really good to just take a lot of different sources. But yeah, let's take a look at some programming roles. So I'm feeling we're going to take a look at some like tools and gameplay programmer roles as like a bit of a focus this time. So let's go have a quick search in the code category, which we've got a lot of code categories. And let's immediately go into the junior. Awesome, great. So it's good to see a few different options here. I think let's immediately go with the let's go back to Blazing Griffin for their graduate junior tools programmer. So they're looking for candidates who can support the development of in-house tools and technology to enhance the game dev process. So that's a really good indication. They're looking for people who might be able to design tool sets that can enable the game designers to do their game design work. This might also therefore mean you might be doing a lot of stuff that might have to do with UI or getting debug UI working. Which, if I take a look down at some of the key responsibilities and requirements, in the key responsibilities, one thing that is noted particularly, troubleshooting and debug tools and workflows, learning how to identify and resolve technical challenges, as well as maintaining documentation for tools and workflows to help ensure usability and longevity. In a nutshell, I think that's pretty much write good code, write code that doesn't break, and write code that you can easily, test and figure out how it might be failing if it becomes a weak point later on. However, if we look at some of the different requirements, they're asking for a degree in computer science, software engineering, or related field or equivalent experience. So if you have a strong portfolio, that can also count. They're looking for a strong understanding of programming fundamentals and object-oriented programming. Some experience with C#, and I believe that's supposed to be C++ as a bonus. So being able to prove that in either internships, personal projects, academia, if you go to a university for computer science. Familiarity with scripting languages such as Python, Classic, demonstrable pattern for problem solving, creating efficient technical solutions. Yeah, I'm pretty sure what that's asking for is about like writing good code, knowing how to identify and fix problems within your code, that kind of jazz. But if we move into some of the desired categories, that's where a lot of things get a bit more interesting. So they're asking for familiarity with game engines in Unity, Unreal Engine being a bonus, because I know Blazing Griffin do quite a lot of work in Unreal. And also, if they're looking for C# and C++ programmer, both those engines, Unity uses C#, Unreal Engine uses a lot of C++ on the back end. So you want to be doing that. So basic understanding of asset pipelines, automation, or procedural content generation. Now, what that might be specifically referring to is about, do you know how to, import files into the various different engines? Do you know any of the extra steps you need to do so in order to, reduce like texture file size, that kind of jazz? Do you have a means of automatically producing assets? How can you, convert your model from Blender into Unreal, set the materials correctly? That's what was probably referring to in like asset pipelines, probably. Automation. So automation in the industry, there's tools such as Jenkins, which is a free one. I'll include a link to that in the description. And there's one called TeamCity, which are different like tools that can be used to automatically test builds. So they're bits and pieces like software that can continuously build the game and spit out errors if the game like fails to compile or work. And it's usually if you they only really sort of like work at scale, so it might be a bit like overkill as an indie developer or starting out in the industry. But I know that Unity have like basically cloud and automation services like built into some of their systems, which you can get access to as part of the student developer pack with GitHub. So I think even understanding what that is, or just proving that you have an awareness or interest in it, might help. And I think also for Jenkins specifically, let's get up the webpage actually. Jenkins, which is one of these softwares, they do some things with like Google Summer of Code. So if you take part in that kind of scheme, that might really help you build up some skills, particularly in this, because it really works best when you're using stuff like Jenkins at scale. However, I will say this kind of stuff leans more in towards like a tools engineer pipeline, that kind of thing. If we immediately move down to experience creating simple user interfaces for tools and applications, there's in Unreal Engine, if you're using Unreal Engine, which, you know, they're looking for as a bit of a bonus, you've got two things that are Slate and UMG. So Slate is more like the code side for all UI in Unreal Engine that you can basically code, and UMG is like the Unreal Motion Graphics that's like the editor you can like mess with blueprints. So a lot of the times if you've built stuff in Unreal Engine, you'll be using the UMG side of it. So understanding how to use Slate might potentially really help you here. However, what would be really useful, I believe, to know as a skill, if you make your own custom tooling, or if you are making your say own custom graphics engine or custom tool sets and editors, there is a free library that is out there that is called Dear ImGUI, and it sees a lot of industry use. I've actually got the link to it right here. Having experience using something like this, basically a bloat-free graphical user interface for C++, you can integrate this into pretty much any C++ application you're doing, and it gives you these nice ways of creating debug windows. And a lot of programs and a lot of like editors, even in industry, use this library for creating interactive debug UIs. It's not appropriate for like production UI because it uses essentially what's called immediate mode graphical user interfaces. That's what the paradigm is called. Whereas if you're trying to make something that's more like game UI, you would be making that using retained mode graphical user interfaces. But if you want to do a lot more research on it, Dear ImGUI is I've been sent some fun like memes that basically show like it's the cornerstone of the industry, that like the a lot of games programming teams are held up by like the tiny little peg that is just Dear ImGUI, this library just working. So if you make projects, I would highly recommend maybe seeing if you can stick this package in there if you're a games programmer and you want to get really like interested in and flex some of your skills, because you'll probably be using this library or something like it. Like Unity has its own ImGUI library, which is just the on GUI functions. So recommend looking that up if you're in Unity as well. But using some of these tool sets and showing you can like use this paradigm, and if you use Dear ImGUI, it will actually help you show how to import things into your projects, which that kind of stuff will be like very helpful. Knowing how to like import libraries, proving that kind of thing will help you out quite massively. But ultimately, when it comes, and yeah, that's kind of what they're looking for down here, proactive attitude, enthusiasm for learning new technologies and methodologies. If you're like, I know how to pull in, install, and like get libraries working within your code from external sources, especially ones that are quite reputable, such as like these ImGUI libraries, that stuff might really help you out there. But like when it comes to portfolios, because obviously programming portfolios is a lot like more difficult and a bit different to that of the types of portfolios you'd see for like design or for like art and such like that. For programming portfolios, I do have some points of notes about like some ideas you could potentially be doing to improve your programmer portfolio. One what you might be looking for is you might want to have like quick videos in your portfolio to give like some different showcases of all of your work you've done. Having like code backups on GitHub if you're able to. If you work at a studio, if you're coming from a place with like an IT department, be very careful about this because it probably, you might have restrictions on how you can use those. But if you do have personal projects that have code bases, having links to GitHubs is pretty much like a godsend for anyone who's like hiring in programming. And within your code, you should just be like essentially highlighting as much as possible in your entire like coding practice. Imagine like you're going to have people inspecting and looking through your code, focusing on like the quality above all else. So, your code's got to be tidy, got to be well commented, not have any consistency errors, and have like consistent naming conventions. If you have a little like technical design document or a little like documentation giving out what your style guide is for each of your documents and proving that you're following it, that's golden. Avoiding stuff like magic numbers as well. Make everything a nice, like, variable or constant, all of that jazz. Just use good coding practices and really like demonstrating some of your skills that way is really what you can do. Like, that's really kind of what you can do best. And like, if you've got like group projects, say you've worked in like a game jam for a bit, you have a little bit of like an extra hurdle of on your portfolios, on your CVs, you should be able to like go a bit more in depth about the different issues that you solve, and like the issues you come by, how you solve them. Specifically, if you can mention like someone brought up through quality assurance testing that there were these bugs in these areas. Here's how I went and identified what the problem was. This turned out to be the problem, and the solution was making a more optimized version of this, and it fixed the issue, and everyone was happy and praised my name. Stuff like that is always really handy. Yeah, so like maybe you want to do that in like a blog or like devlogs, or breaking it down as part of a separate page within a portfolio for each of your projects. And ultimately, yeah, in general, provide clips, have some access to the repo, and explain in short summary what you're able to do. That kind of that in all industries, in all disciplines, it seems to be that like helps reviewers get a close look at something without having to like basically be inside your head to understand it. Because ultimately, even as like a programmer, they want to see if you're like the right person for them, and someone who can explain their code succinctly and kind of quickly in a way that people can just hop in and just kind of start understanding where they need to look at is really going to help. Yeah. All right. So I think let's move on from the Blazing Griffin post. Let's see. Let's take a look at some more experience. We're going to have a look at a couple experience ones today. The first thing I want to do, I'll take a quick look immediately at Bulkhead's latest post. Let's see. Bulkhead are currently applying. They're looking for a mid-level gameplay engineer. Again, looking for Unreal Engine experience, which is pretty good. Working on a first-person shooter, brilliant, and working with designers, artists, other engineers to create smooth, immersive game player experiences while tackling technical challenges in C++ and UE4/5. Brilliant. So, whereas the other one might have been a bit more about tooling and tooling focused, which might also benefit from a lot of understanding and care for user experience and portfolio showing tools. This one might help for coding specifically mechanics and gameplay features. Now, if we take a quick look, implementing refining multiplayer mechanics on a large-scale FPS. So, I know there are a bunch of online like cloud services, and I think it's called Improbable. There's a cloud service called Improbable that like help make like 100 and 1,000 player like servers possible and work and be scalable. So if you're able to prove evidence that you these kind of large scale servers exist and even have a bit of experience in them, like there is a system, and I believe it's called Play Cloud. Let me find out. Is it called Play Cloud? Might not be. No, I don't believe it's Play Cloud, but I'll figure out what it is and I'll send it. But as part of taking part in the GitHub Student Developer Pack, which you can get for free if you are within any kind of like educational institution, or if you are not if you're not inside that, but are within like an indie developer sort of context, you can subscribe to get like free trials or like free small scale cloud servers for you to test and make like very small multiplayer games with like maximum amount of like connections allowed to it before you'd have to like even pay anything. So anything on your portfolio that would show multiplayer mechanics seems like that would be really valuable here. Contributing to code reviews and improving development pipelines. Yeah, classic. You want to be a good communicator, all of that jazz. They're looking for a proficiency in C++ programming with experience in gameplay development, which again, that's going to need to be something you'll sort of learn at this ground level as a junior. Again, if you're applying to this at this point and you are looking for your first place in the industry, if you're trying to skip over that junior role, genuinely look back at that Blazing Griffin one. You want to basically be doing in your own time that amount of work, the amount of work that can like reflect being like a junior in industry. And that would mean you might want to make like proper big projects that, you know, use GitHub, like use Perforce if you're able to get access to it. I know they do have like free student and free like, you know, freelancer licenses for Perforce especially. Like tangent on version control. Version control, you know, as a programmer, like everyone who's listening to this probably like already knows how to do 10 million things in like Git or Perforce that I don't. But if you don't, and if you are still a little bit new, maybe you've only used Git and GitHub or like GitLab or anything like that. For UE, for like C++ and like Unreal Engine projects specifically, you should very seriously take a look at Perforce, which is, I mean, Unreal has great integration for it, and a lot of companies and a lot of studios do genuinely use it a lot for over GitHub and like GitLab and all that for their projects. So you'll want to definitely take a peek at that. And if you can build games and do stuff with that, maybe even just start building in automation wherever you can. That will really help. That will, you know, massively help you out, take yourself that step above just being like a junior or just, you know, being at that position where you currently are. Again, understanding of multiplayer mechanics, replication, and performance optimization. Yeah, very specific multiplayer networking focus. It seems to be that these kind of careers that afford these specific kind of like jobs, you want to be focusing specifically on the keywords like, is it a multiplayer FPS? Are they looking for single player? Because, you know, are they looking for tools? Because these are all going to be different requirements, because code and programming is such a wide role. There's even like, you know, enemy and AI programming, which is a whole different field in it of itself. So you're going to want to be searching and really narrowing it down to the niche of the stuff that you are interested in. And if you've got like a whole bunch of everything, that can be really useful for smaller companies. But for larger companies like Bulkhead, you want to figure out how to like get your portfolio maybe only showing one or like two of those specific, you know, disciplines, like say, you know, knowing how to make multiplayer FPS mechanics and like tool sets, focusing only on like say those for the purpose of applying to this one. Whereas with like an indie studio, you might go and just say, hey, I am the whole thing. I can do all of it, which, you know, that would be nice. It depends on the company that you're going for. So like always being willing to shift around your portfolio as it's necessary is good. So honestly, take that in mind when you're taking a look at what your portfolios are, what portfolio like software or websites you're going to build it on. If you're a programmer, you most likely should absolutely maybe make your portfolio website yourself. That could be one big flex. I know a lot of people who do that. Very impressive. And yes, Unreal Engine 4.5 experience, a problem-solving attitude, and brilliant. Yeah, so a lot of very similar stuff from before, but I'm going to take one more look at one more company, and I'm going to search for this one specifically because I saw it earlier. They did a nice gameplay programmer role they recently had open. If we look at this role in terms of responsibilities, there's a keyword TDD here, which normally would throw me because I think that means technical design document, but no, it doesn't, because there's more acronyms. So let's take a look at some of these things. Instantly jumps out to me in the nice to have section. Having experience with TDD and ECS. TDD in this scenario, they're sort of talking about like test driven development, which is again all about this like testing your changes with automation, creating test cases for your code. You know, not every engineer is going to be experienced on that front though. So if you are able to get experience, that kind of stuff will definitely help you in this job. And the ECS is referring to like entity component system. This is something that Unity has, and again, helping you in terms of developing like tool sets, you know, testing that kind of stuff. Google is your friend. Really exploring a lot of those like functionalities of these engines and the stuff they do to try to optimize and automate things. It's very helpful. And they're also looking for experience with machine learning algorithms, which is an interesting one for this specific job. What they're looking for is 4 years of experience in C++, an excellent feel for RPG gameplay systems, open-minded, willing to experiment and iterate over a specific feature. Again, you can probably show that in a portfolio by just being like, as you're developing games, as you're developing your tool sets, make little recordings. You can use OBS, you can use screen to GIF, which is what I use a lot for taking little bite-sized videos of work in progresses and work in progress code. Do those, keep hold of those pieces, and don't just, you know, delete them or bin them. You can use that to really show a progression and show the different like stages of how you iterate over your code over amount of time. Concepts such as state machines, pathfinding, AI routine should be second nature. The ability to think like a designer to create compelling and fun play. That's an interesting one. Larian specifically wanting kind of like a mix of game programmer and designer here. Looking for people who can communicate in English. You're a team player willing to take responsibility, yada yada. Excellent software and problem solving skills, excellent software debugging skills, excellent architectural skills. Designing many parallel and gameplay systems is not a problem for you. Game development experience, hopefully with that 4+ C++ experience will help you with that. And that being an on-site role. And yeah, I think another interesting nice to have is having shipped games, having a shipped game sort of console titles. Specifically when it's referring to this, it's, you know, referring to stuff that's going like beyond just itch.io. Stores even like Steam, for example. Steam has a process that you have to go through in order to get the game out, and you have to pass a certain level of quality assurance testing and like, you know, automation, like automated testing to make sure like the game you know, is functional and like runs. That's already a little bit of experience with that lead time and with that, like, you know, part of the pipeline. But if you're able to get stuff out on a, you know, console platform, and something like that might be something like, if you make like VR games, for example, you might want to try to get it on the Meta Store via like SideQuest, for example, because Meta Quest 2s are quite like, you know, locked down headsets. So if you're able to kind of get that on there and like prove that you can build that kind of experience for that platform, you can show that you can adapt to a lot of some platform weirdness and guidelines that they like to follow. Yeah. I believe with the state of that, we are coming towards the end of the episode. So I think what I will do is I think we'll go back and just summarize, you know, what we learned on the programming section today. So a couple of like 3 key little bits of advice in terms of how you can be improving as a programmer with your portfolio. Check the links in the description that I put down in there. They might not come immediately as the video arrives, but within the next couple of days, I will endeavor to get it on there. Figuring out how to incorporate external libraries into your projects and proving that you can work with those kind of systems can be a really big boon to have, and a very big flex to show that you have. Having stuff like, you know, code backups on GitHub and keeping your code nice and clean, and like figuring out how in your portfolio to direct people to your code repositories, so people can see what your coding style is and that it's, you know, at a very high quality. That's going to be very like nice and useful. And I think, yeah, figuring out if you can incorporate systems like Jenkins or like Dear ImGUI into your project, which is stuff that the games industry, those programming teams do actively use. Any of those experiences, see if you can take place take part in Google Summer of Code, for example, that could be very valuable. Those kind of highlighting those kind of experiences will really help you out here. And of course, taking a look at a lot of these different jobs, those are just 3 jobs from programming and 3 jobs from QA earlier that you can look through. These are not like the be all and end all advice for all of these jobs. So I would highly recommend go on the website, come on the Games Jobs Live website, and also check out the Discord. If you see any like interesting jobs, do just take a little like screenshot or take the link, post it in there. Send us some of your thoughts. We can we can have a little like discussion about it. But there's 345 code jobs that are currently up this month on the website, which is absolutely fantastic, actually. So it's a big industry, and I'd recommend just having a look and seeing what you can find, and making notes on each of there. What kind of stuff is a lot of similar things that are coming up? What things might be specific to different jobs? And be careful. Like read the beginning blurb specifically about what kind of work they want you to do in your team. And I think with that, I want to thank Melissa so much also for being a guest earlier, and thank you very much for joining me here today for another Games Jobs Live Jobs Board highlights. We will be back next week for the UK jobs report analysis for the month of April, and that will be very exciting. So I'll see you all in a week. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time. Good luck, everybody.